Okay, let's talk about neighbor tones. Neighbor tones are used less in second species counterpoint. We don't see them as often, but we do see them and they are allowed. Now, what they are is a case where a note starts on a consonant, goes up to a dissonant, and then comes back down to the same note in the new chord. So it goes from a consonant to a dissonant to a consonant, but it has to be the same note. Let's look at an example. So I have here a new counterpoint for us. This time we've got the cantus firmus on the top and the counterpoint on the bottom. That's totally okay. Sometimes we just switch it up. So let's go right here. Actually, these two bars is what we're looking at here. So I want to try to explain this G a little bit. So we can't really call it a passing tone because we have here we would have a consonant, here's a dissonant, and here's another consonant. So that in and of itself is okay for a passing tone, but what's not is we approach by step, and then we would need to go up to an A, right? Because we need to step in and step out in the same direction. In this case, we stepped in and we stepped out in the opposite direction, starting at an F, going up to a G, and then going back down to an F. This G, in this case, we would call a neighbor tone. It just kind of inches up from F and then inches right back down to F. That's a neighbor tone. Now, there are two different types of neighbor tones. There's upper neighbor tone and lower neighbor tone. This case is going to be an upper neighbor tone, right? Because it goes up. That's the only thing. So we go from a consonant to a dissonant to a consonant. The dissonance still has to be on the second half of the beat, the unaccented part of the beat. So we would call this, let's put some labels on some stuff here. We would call this a preparation. And then here we would call this an upper neighbor, UN. And here we would call it a resolution. Okay? So preparation, upper neighbor, resolution. Now check this out. We're going to make this a little more complicated. Because we have another one, like right away. In this particular case, this R, this resolution, is also a preparation. So this one works a little bit different. We have an F to a C, that's a consonant. Then we have an E to a C, that's a sixth, that's also a consonant. So in this case, it's a consonant, and it resolves to a consonant. So all three are consonants, but that is also allowed in a neighbor tone. You can do neighbor tones from consonants to consonants and still call them neighbor tones. They're a little harder to spot, and they're even more rare than the other kind where we go to a dissonance. But we could label that as a lower neighbor because it's going from a note away and then back to the same note. I have one more in here. Right here. We have another lower neighbor. So here we have, let's label it first. That's going to be a lower neighbor, right? Because the note goes down. So here we have a G to an E. So that's a sixth. That's okay. Here we have an F to an E. That's a seventh. So that's going to be a dissonance. It's in the right spot of the measure. That's totally okay. And then we go back to an E. We go back to a G against a D, which is a fifth. That's a consonant, and that's okay. And then we move on to the end of the piece.